He never lost a round that mattered, never bled, never broke. In a sport built on chaos, Khabib Nurmagomedov was control incarnate. 29 wins, 0 losses, no comebacks needed, no asterisks. From the rugged mountains of Dagestan to the roar of Las Vegas arenas, he didn't fight for fame. He fought for legacy, for honor, and for his father. He didn't talk trash, didn't sell pay-per-views with antics. He sold truth, discipline, and domination. But behind the stoic exterior was a man forged in hardship, shaped by war, and driven by faith. His rise wasn't lucky. His reign wasn't flashy. It was built on something the fight game rarely sees: purpose. This is the story of a man who entered the cage like a soldier, fought like a machine, and left like a legend. This is Khabib. Before the spotlight, before the hype, before global fame, there was only Dagestan, a fractured land of mountains, mosques, and memories of war. Here, in the village of Sildi, a boy named Khabib Nurmagomedov was born on September 20th, 1988. The world he entered wasn't built on dreams. It was built on survival, respect, and faith. Khabib's father, Abdulmanap, was more than just a coach. He was a decorated military commando in the Russian Special Forces. He believed that discipline wasn't just a virtue, it was a requirement for survival. So from age 5, Khabib was wrestling wild animals in the yard, grappling with adults, lifting boulders, and learning early that pain is temporary, but honor lasts. In Dagestan, wrestling is not a sport, it's identity. School-aged boys trained 6, sometimes 8 hours a day. Every village had a sambo coach. Every young fighter aspired to leave and prove something bigger than himself. And from the start, Khabib stood out. Short, compact, low center of gravity, and, most unusually, even for his people, controlled. No unnecessary aggression, no wasted motion. By the time he was in his teens, Abdulmanap had built an iron program. Khabib's childhood friends described him as calm, reserved, and impossibly focused. When other boys went outside to laugh or play, he stayed inside to train. He didn't entertain, he prepared. But Dagestan also demanded more. In 1999 and early 2000s, the region was still recovering from war and corruption. Sometimes house bombs were real. Kidnappings were local news. Khabib saw that chaos firsthand, wrestled it, and held it at bay. So when he finally stood up at a young age against local fighters on combat sambo mats, he wasn't scared. He was ready. By 2008, Karaman, Khabib's first Russian-style ring, was filling with talent. His wrestling peers were Olympic prospects, UFC hopefuls, even federal agents. Khabib began winning youth titles: combat sambo, youth champion, European champion, navigating each fight with a level of control that looked robotic. Not because he lacked emotion, but because he had mastered it. His choice wasn't someone else's dream. He didn't fight for letters on the wall, sponsors, or dollar signs. He fought because, in Dagestan, identity and pride were tied to discipline and dominance, and Khabib was being raised to embody both. Everything important in his formation happened before he ever crossed continents. He had built his body and mind in a land that demanded unbreakable resolve, and that would soon make him unstoppable on the global stage. Khabib Nurmagomedov entered his professional MMA career like a storm no one saw coming. From 2008 to 2012, he racked up a 16-0 record, not in plush arenas, but in wrestling rooms, warehouses, stadium basements across Russia and nearby countries. No lights, no TV cameras, no champagne showers, only submission chains and bone-crushing top pressure. His early opponents were seasoned regional sambo fighters with legitimate public reputations in Russia, men with years of experience in controlled competition. He faced them all with one tool: his father's system. Khabib would close distance instantly, control posture, transition seamlessly into ground control, then break his opponent's will. Every fight looked the same. Every opponent eventually tapped or was dominated round after round. Then, in 2012, came the call no Russian fighter had yet earned. The UFC, hungry to build its brand in Russia and seeking legitimate lightweight contenders, signed Khabib. He stepped into the Octagon for the first time at UFC on FX, Guillard vs. Miller in San Jose. The world barely noticed. He didn't press a sales tour. He didn't tweet trash. He didn't pose. He simply fought. Over the next 9 fights in the UFC, Khabib never wavered. Abel Trujillo, 21 takedowns. Pat Healy, infinite control, nearly no offense. Rafael Dos Anjos, quiet confidence. Vaseline, ever-present foot pressure. Khabib didn't just win. He dissolved opponents mentally before physically disassembling them. Language barriers? He barely spoke English. No memorable voice, but his wrestling was a message in its own language. Weary opponents raised their hands and kept them raised. No bluff, no comeback, just inevitability. Inside the gym at AKA, among legends like Daniel Cormier, he maintained the same composure. No ego, no flash, but everyone noticed the grip and drive on the mat. DC said Khabib's ground transport made even heavyweights look light. Kane said he had stamina for days. Javier Mendez, his coach, said he was the hardest worker he had ever trained. Yet outside, the UFC machine didn't push him. He still fought main cards, but rarely co-headlined. He wasn't offered Conor-esque backing or storylines. Instead, they watched quietly as he dismantled division after division, like it was just another bullet point. The industry was building for stars and noise. Khabib didn't know noise, or need it. His rise was relentless, but not loud, and ahead lay a storm he couldn't ignore, led by the world's biggest star. By 2013, the lightweight division was hungry for a new narrative. While fans watched Conor McGregor, Diaz brothers, and media-facing fighters grow their clout, Khabib kept forging his path. He wasn't seeking drama. He was building empire. Opportunistically, the UFC booked him against Abel Trujillo at UFC 160. The fight became Khabib's signature statement: 21 takedowns, every round. He broke Trujillo's hips, will, and undefeated record. It was not just domination. It was stamping the earth. Next came veteran Pat Healy. The fight nearly changed his trajectory. A potential loss on the cards became another demonstration of territory control. Fans whispered, "He's unstoppable." Fighters avoided calling him out. Then came Rafael dos Anjos, the run that many thought would derail his ascent. A former lightweight champion with maturing strikes and control. But during fight week, RDA injured his bicep, and the fight was pushed back. When it happened at UFC on Fox 11, Khabib shredded him. Top control, jabs, takedowns until RDA quit mid-fight to return to his base and psyche. These fights were all technical demonstrations, but deeper undercurrents were building. Injuries peppered his timeline: ACL tears, neck spasms, a separated rib. Yet he never canceled. He trained around them. He fought through them. His teammates at AKA, those bigger, stronger bodies, marveled at his conditioning. Khabib rarely took damage. He didn't hold grudges. He simply took land. By 2014 to 15, Khabib had earned a top 2 ranking, and everyone inside the UFC machine knew he deserved title consideration. Yet the spotlight continued to favor flashy matchmakers and bigger names. Then came the day everything changed. Khabib versus Al Iaquinta for the vacant lightweight title at UFC 223. The main event dropped, title strip. It became an unassuming fight between less-than-ideal contenders. No problem. If you want legacy, sometimes you take what's offered. Khabib dismantled Iaquinta with composure, pressure, grappling excellence. He didn't clamor for plaudits. He just lifted the belt. When he left the octagon, he didn't roar. He didn't pose. He walked back, belt in hand, like a man fulfilling destiny. And somewhere in Las Vegas, the world finally noticed. By 2018, Khabib Nurmagomedov was undefeated, undisputed, and still somehow underappreciated. But everything changed the moment the UFC booked the biggest fight in MMA history: Khabib versus Conor McGregor. It wasn't just a fight. It was a clash of cultures, codes, and chaos. McGregor was everything Khabib wasn't: loud, flamboyant, and worshipped by media. He had captured 2 belts, headlined pay-per-views, and transcended MMA into pop culture. Khabib had earned his spot through discipline. Conor had talked his way into it, and when their paths finally crossed, the world paid attention. The build-up was toxic. McGregor insulted Khabib's family, his religion, his country. He mocked his father. He smashed a dolly through a bus window days before UFC 223, targeting Khabib and putting fighters in the hospital. Dana White called it criminal. The media called it promotion. Khabib called it personal, but he stayed quiet, focused. No Twitter wars, no theatrics, only preparation. He faced Al Iaquinta for the vacant title instead, dominating every round. And when the McGregor fight was finally announced for UFC 229, the MMA world erupted. The fight itself wasn't close. From the first bell, Khabib smothered Conor. Takedown, control, ground, and pound. McGregor landed a few shots in round 3, but it was Khabib's fight from start to finish. In round 4, he locked in a neck crank. Conor tapped. Khabib didn't let go right away. And then, chaos. Khabib leaped over the cage, charging at McGregor's team. Brawls erupted cage-side. Security swarmed. The UFC's most-watched fight turned into a scandal, but Khabib didn't flinch. In the post-fight interview, he asked, "Why you talk about me jumping the cage, but not what he said about my religion, my father, my country?" He was fined, suspended, vilified in headlines, but in Dagestan, he was a hero. That night, Khabib didn't just defeat Conor. He exposed the fight game's hypocrisy, where showmanship was praised but honor was ignored, and he never apologized for defending his code. The McGregor saga made Khabib a global star, but it also reinforced what he already knew. Fame is a storm. Legacy is stone. To understand Khabib, you have to understand his father, Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov, a master of combat sambo, a coach of champions, and the architect of Khabib's discipline. Their bond wasn't just blood, it was everything. Abdulmanap raised his son not only to fight, but to think, to reflect, to obey a higher calling. Islam, humility, respect, these weren't side traits. They were the foundation. And inside the cage, every takedown, every transition, every decision Khabib made was touched by his father's voice. When Khabib trained at AKA in the US, Abdulmanap would still watch from Russia. He'd send feedback, adjust tactics remotely, and push his son to be better. When Abdulmanap was finally granted a visa to corner Khabib in person for the first time, it was a moment years in the making. Then came 2020. COVID swept the world. Abdulmanap contracted the virus, fell into a coma, and passed away in July. Khabib was devastated. This wasn't just a coach. This was his anchor, his example, his purpose. The loss could have broken him, but instead, it clarified him. 3 months later, Khabib stepped into the Octagon at UFC 254 to face Justin Gaethje. He had a broken foot. He hadn't told the media. He hadn't complained. He just trained quietly, with grief as his only sparring partner. The fight was clinical. Gaethje, known for violent leg kicks and knockout power, was neutralized in minutes. Khabib took him down, passed his guard, and locked in a triangle choke. Gaethje tapped. The ref waved it off, and Khabib collapsed in tears. He left his gloves in the center of the octagon, and in that moment, he announced his retirement. Undefeated, untouched, and done. No rematch, no drama, just a promise to his mother. "I cannot fight without my father." 29-0. He walked away not because he had nothing left to prove, but because the man he fought for was gone. The fight game had lost a champion, but Khabib had lost his reason to keep going, and he honored that silence with dignity. When most fighters retire, they look back with regret, with what-ifs, with bruises and debts. But not Khabib. He left on his terms. No scandals, no losses, no wars with the UFC, just 29 straight victories and a resume built on dominance. Dana White tried to lure him back, offered rematches, money, title shots. Fans begged for one more fight, against GSP, against Oliveira, against the new era. But Khabib declined every time. He said what he meant. And unlike most in combat sports, he meant what he said. Instead of chasing more belts, Khabib chose to build a legacy off the mat. He launched Eagle FC, promoted young Dagestani fighters, and guided rising stars like Islam Makhachev. His goal wasn't to remain in the spotlight, it was to shine it on others. As a coach, he carried his father's lessons forward. Honor, discipline, no shortcuts, no trash talk, only work. He turned down massive offers from promoters and brands. He didn't start a podcast. He didn't chase YouTube clout. He disappeared from cameras and reappeared only when it mattered, when he had something to teach. And the MMA world took note. The UFC eventually inducted him into the Hall of Fame, calling him one of the most dominant fighters in history. But even then, Khabib didn't linger. He thanked the crowd, quoted the Quran, and stepped off the stage. Because legacy, to Khabib, isn't built with noise. It's built with example. He didn't just go 29-0, he left 29-0. In a sport that devours its heroes, Khabib Nurmagomedov walked away clean. And in doing so, he became the rarest thing in fighting, a legend with nothing left to prove. To understand Khabib Nurmagomedov's dominance, you have to break down the code behind his control. It wasn't just wrestling. It wasn't just sambo. It was a blueprint, designed, Tested, perfected. His approach was simple. Close the distance, drag you to the cage, and drown you in pressure. But the execution? Pure genius. At range, Khabib was deceptively patient. He'd keep his head off center, throw feints, and wait for his moment to blitz. Once in on the hips or underhooks, the magic began. Most fighters shoot takedowns and hope to finish quickly. Khabib chained takedowns, trip, lift, trip again, until the opponent was grounded. And then came phase 2, control. He'd lock one leg with his own, trap an arm, flatten his opponent out like a surgeon. It wasn't ground and pound chaos, it was calculated violence. His strikes weren't just to damage, they were to force openings. You moved, he adjusted. You paused, he punished. And it wasn't just skill, it was conditioning. Khabib trained at altitude in Dagestan. He sparred with heavyweights. His pace never slowed. Opponents who usually controlled tempo found themselves panicked after round 1. Mentally, he was a monster. Fighters like Dustin Poirier and Michael Johnson admitted it post-fight. They'd never felt pressure like that. Johnson said he felt trapped. Poirier called it helpless. Not just physical pressure, spiritual pressure. And perhaps most terrifying, Khabib didn't care about highlight reels. He didn't chase knockouts. He chased perfection. He averaged 5+ takedowns per fight, absorbed less than a single significant strike per minute, and finished 19 of his 29 wins. The result? A fighting style that wasn't built for moments. It was built for dominance. Every second was control. Every round was his. He wasn't the most athletic, not the flashiest striker, but he made greatness look simple because his system was brutal, binary, and bulletproof, and no one, not even the most explosive or creative fighters in the world, could solve it. After retirement, Khabib didn't just vanish, he evolved. From athlete to icon, from fighter to symbol. In Russia, he became a national treasure. In Dagestan, a demigod. In the Muslim world, a proud ambassador. His fame wasn't just about victories, it was about values. He refused to sell alcohol endorsements. He turned down fashion deals. He spoke openly about faith, respect, and the discipline of the Prophet Muhammad. Where most athletes built brands from excess, Khabib built his from restraint. He didn't have to shout to be heard. When he launched Eagle FC, it wasn't just to make money, it was to create opportunity. He brought Dagestani fighters out of the shadows, gave them a stage, and paid them fairly. He built gyms, funded youth programs, and became a mentor for rising athletes from across Central Asia. On social media, he didn't post cars or watches. He posted Quranic verses, training photos, and words of encouragement. His followers didn't admire his wealth, they admired his clarity. And globally, Khabib became the face of what greatness could look like without ego. Fans who never watched MMA respected him. Sports legends from football to tennis referenced his control. Business leaders pointed to his discipline. Presidents hosted him. Children dressed like him on Eid. His story had transcended sport. Even in pop culture, in memes, reels, and YouTube shorts, Khabib remained relevant without ever chasing it. His presence felt earned, not performed. In a sport notorious for short-lived fame, Khabib's longevity came not from competition, but from conviction. He proved you could be dominant and humble, aggressive and principled, violent in skill, peaceful in spirit. And that duality is what made the world listen. 29 fights, 29 wins, 0 losses, no cuts, no knockdowns, no scandal, no comeback tour, no desperate last hurrah. Khabib Nurmagomedov's story didn't just end clean, it ended complete. In the sport of MMA, perfection is supposed to be impossible. The margin for error is razor thin. One mistake, one moment, and an entire career can spiral. But Khabib never spiraled. He stayed centered, grounded, both literally and spiritually. Critics tried to poke holes. His competition wasn't as deep. He fought too safe. But those critiques fade under the numbers. 13-0 in the UFC. Wins over champions, interim title holders, future Hall of Famers. He didn't dodge anyone. The UFC dodged him. And more than the record, more than the belt, was the standard he set. He didn't beg for attention. He didn't fake drama. He didn't throw post-fight tantrums or insult family members to sell fights. He showed up, dominated, left. That was the show. And when the time came to leave forever, he walked with pride, with silence, with honor. Fighters come and go. Champions rise and fall. But legends? They're rare. Khabib is more than a fighter. He's a case study in purpose. A man who proved that it's possible to be elite without being consumed by ego, that you can lead with faith and finish with fire. His record may be broken someday, his style may be mimicked, but his essence, untouchable. Because the truth is simple. In the chaos of fighting, Khabib brought clarity, and in walking away, he became immortal. From a mountainside estate in Dagestan to luxury villas in Dubai, from a garage blending rugged off-road power with refined European engineering to rare watches gifted by royalty, Khabib's wealth reflects both his roots and his rise. Yet beneath the visible signs of success lies a network of businesses, investments, and one mysterious asset so unexpected it challenges everything we think we know about him. This is the untold story of Khabib's fortune, how a humble fighter from the mountains became a global mogul without ever abandoning the values that made him unstoppable. Long before the private jets, business ventures, and global recognition, Khabib Nurmagomedov's life was defined by the rugged mountains of Dagestan. Born in 1988 in the village of Sildi, his upbringing was as far from luxury as it gets. Steep, snow-covered terrain, limited resources, and a community that valued resilience over riches. His father, Abdulmanap, was not only his first coach, but also his guiding force, instilling discipline that would become the cornerstone of Khabib's success. Training wasn't confined to a gym, it was everywhere, on rocky hillsides, in freezing rivers, and, famously, even wrestling a bear cub as a child. Those early years shaped his relationship with money. Growing up in an environment where hard work and honor were valued above material possessions, Khabib learned to treat wealth as a tool, not a trophy. But make no mistake, even in those humble beginnings, there were signs he understood the bigger picture. His dream wasn't just to fight, it was to secure a future for his family and community. When he entered professional MMA, the financial stakes were modest. Regional fights paid enough to get by, not enough to build an empire. But his dominance was undeniable. Fight after fight, win after win. His reputation grew until the UFC came calling. Once inside the Octagon, he became an unstoppable force, suffocating grappling, relentless pressure, and a mental toughness that broke opponents long before the final bell. By the time he defeated Conor McGregor in 2018, Khabib's profile and paychecks had exploded. The bout wasn't just a sporting victory, it was a financial turning point. Pay-per-view revenue, sponsorships, and performance bonuses turned the son of Dagestan into one of the highest-paid athletes in MMA. But unlike others who might immediately funnel earnings into flashy displays, Khabib's spending remained calculated. He expanded his lifestyle, yes, but always with purpose. And as the world celebrated the fighter, the man quietly began building the foundations of a financial empire. The first real glimpse of this came not in the form of a business deal or a car, but in a property that reflected both his heritage and his ascent. That property was a home, not just anywhere, but in the heart of Dagestan. Khabib's primary residence in Dagestan is a testament to the balance he strikes between his roots and his success. Nestled against the dramatic backdrop of the Caucasus Mountains, the estate is a far cry from the modest home of his childhood, built with an emphasis on both luxury and tradition. It combines modern amenities with design elements that reflect his culture. Stone facades, intricate woodwork, and expansive interiors speak of wealth, but not in a way that alienates the community around him. The property reportedly includes multiple levels, spacious guest areas, and private quarters for his family. High ceilings and wide windows frame mountain views, while the interiors feature a blend of European styling and Dagestani craftsmanship. The estate isn't just about personal comfort. It's also a venue for hosting family gatherings, community events, and visits from high-profile guests. For Khabib, home isn't a retreat from the world. It's a place to connect with it on his terms. It's said that the estate also includes a private training area, not a flashy, oversized gym, but a functional space that allows him to stay close to his roots in martial arts. Here, he can train young fighters from the region, continuing his father's mission of building opportunities for Dagestan's next generation. This isn't just property as a status symbol. It's property as a statement that no matter how far he's traveled, he's anchored to where it all began. But the Dagestan estate is only part of the story. As his wealth grew, Khabib expanded his property portfolio beyond the borders of Russia. He made moves into some of the world's most elite real estate estate markets, positioning himself among business leaders and royalty. And one destination, in particular, became more than just a getaway spot. It became a second base of operations for the Eagle. That destination was Dubai, a city of gold, glass, and opportunity. Dubai has become the playground for global athletes, celebrities, and entrepreneurs. And Khabib Nurmagomedov fits right in, though in his own understated way. While others flaunt their penthouses and Lamborghinis on social media, Khabib's presence in Dubai is more measured, yet the wealth is undeniable. Reports suggest he owns or has access to a luxury property in the city, possibly a villa or high-rise apartment in one of Dubai's most exclusive districts, such as Palm Jumeirah or downtown Dubai. These residences are often equipped with infinity pools, private gyms, and panoramic views of the skyline or the Arabian Gulf. The location offers him not just luxury, but convenience, quick access to high-level meetings, sporting events, and a network of influential figures in the UAE. Dubai also offers Khabib something equally valuable: privacy. In a city where high-profile figures are commonplace, he can move without the constant scrutiny that follows him in Russia or the United States. This environment has allowed him to cultivate relationships with some of the Middle East's most powerful business and political figures, opening doors for future ventures. And then, of course, there's the lifestyle. In Dubai, Khabib enjoys a level of service and exclusivity that few places in the world can match. Private dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, networking events in skyscraper lounges, and perhaps even the occasional discreet supercar cruise along Sheikh Zayed Road. But, as always, Khabib's choices seem deliberate. No unnecessary flash, just calculated enjoyment. Still, Dubai didn't just give him luxury real estate and networking opportunities. It also became the home for one of his most visible signs of wealth, a vehicle collection that, while not as oversized as some athletes, still carries the unmistakable stamp of a man who knows quality when he sees it. And it's in this garage that we start to see the blend of rugged practicality and refined taste that defines the Eagle's empire. For Khabib Nurmagomedov, cars aren't just transportation. They're an extension of his philosophy. Unlike many champions who fill warehouses with hypercars and post every purchase on Instagram, Khabib's collection is deliberate, balanced between rugged utility and refined luxury. Every vehicle seems to serve a purpose, whether it's navigating the mountainous roads of Dagestan, cruising through Dubai's immaculate highways, or arriving at high-profile events with understated authority. In Dagestan, he's often spotted in vehicles built for endurance and terrain mastery: Toyota Land Cruisers, Nissan Patrols, and other SUVs known for their reliability in extreme conditions. These aren't status symbols for him, they're tools, chosen because they can handle the realities of the Caucasus landscape. It's a reminder that no matter how far he's risen, his roots are in a place where practicality matters as much as presentation. In Dubai, however, the garage takes on a different tone. Here, the vehicles lean toward European engineering and luxury. He's been seen with high-end Mercedes models, including the S-Class, a favorite among business elites, as well as BMW 7 Series sedans, which combine performance with comfort. There's also talk of him owning or having access to more exotic machines, such as a Bentley Bentayga or even a discreetly kept Ferrari, though such details remain largely unconfirmed. Khabib doesn't flaunt them, but their presence in his orbit is hard to miss. One of the more unique aspects of his approach is restraint. In a sport where fighters often splurge on eye-watering supercars within months of hitting a big payday, Khabib's selections reflect patience and long-term value. He chooses vehicles that retain their worth or offer reliability over flash, a sign that even in luxury, he's thinking like an investor. Yet, within this practicality lies an element of prestige. His Dubai garage, by all accounts, is spotless and meticulously maintained. Vehicles are serviced to perfection, and in some cases, customized subtly. Upgraded interiors, enhanced suspension, bespoke finishes, changes that make them personal without screaming for attention. And perhaps most telling is how his vehicles mirror his public persona. Just as his fighting style avoided unnecessary risks, his garage avoids unnecessary excess. There's no need for 20 cars when half a dozen, each chosen for a specific role, can make just as strong a statement. For Khabib, it's about control over his image, over his assets, over every outward sign of success. Still, while cars are an important part of his lifestyle, they're far from the most personal expression of his wealth. That title belongs to something more intimate: the items he wears, carries, and receives. Pieces that aren't parked in a garage, but worn on the wrist or around the neck. Because when it comes to accessories, the Eagle's choices tell an even deeper story. If Khabib Nurmagomedov's cars speak to his practicality, his watches and personal accessories reveal a different side. A side where craftsmanship, symbolism, and the weight of a moment matter just as much as the item's monetary value. While he is not known for dripping in gold chains or parading diamond-encrusted timepieces, Khabib's collection still commands respect, both for its quality and for the stories behind each piece. Among the most notable are luxury watches, some purchased, others gifted by influential friends, sponsors, and even members of royalty. He has been photographed wearing Rolex, the iconic day-date president, a choice that has graced the wrists of world leaders, as well as the sportier Rolex Submariner for more casual occasions. Both are timeless pieces, built to last, much like the reputation Khabib has forged. He has also been linked to an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, one of the most recognizable luxury sports watches in the world, known for its octagonal bezel and intricate craftsmanship. Unlike some athletes who opt for heavily customized diamond-studded versions, Khabib's style tends toward factory-original models, signaling an appreciation for purity in design, a value consistent with his straightforward, no-nonsense approach in and out of the octagon. But watches are only part of the story. In his culture, the giving and receiving of gifts holds deep meaning, and Khabib's life is rich with such exchanges. These aren't just luxury for luxury's sake. They're tokens of respect, alliances, and shared victories. High-end prayer beads carved from rare materials, bespoke suits gifted by influential figures, and ceremonial daggers, often presented as symbols of honor, have all entered his possession over the years. There's also the matter of his training gear and apparel, much of which comes from premium sponsors. While fight kits are standard for UFC athletes, Khabib's personal attire often blends comfort, utility, and understated branding. It's part of an image he has cultivated deliberately, a man of status who doesn't need to shout about it. One particularly notable moment came after his victory over Conor McGregor, when Khabib's public stock, and thus his market value, skyrocketed. Offers from luxury brands poured in, some of which he accepted, but always on terms that aligned with his principles. It's why you don't see him endorsing alcohol or gambling brands, despite their lucrative payouts. This moral selectivity has likely cost him millions in potential sponsorship income, but it's also strengthened his personal brand, making it more appealing to markets and investors aligned with his values. And that's the key. In Khabib's world, accessories aren't just about looking good. They're about reinforcing the story he wants the world to see: disciplined, principled, and quietly successful. Every piece on his wrist, in his home, or worn in public contributes to that image. But accessories, no matter how meaningful, are just the surface. The real engine behind his empire isn't what he wears, it's what he builds. And when we turn to his business ventures and investments, we see the full scope of how the Eagle has transformed fight purses into a lasting, diversified fortune. Because Khabib's greatest assets aren't parked in a garage or displayed in a cabinet, they're earning while he sleeps. For Khabib Nurmagomedov, the end of his fighting career was never the end of his earning potential. In fact, retirement marked the beginning of a new phase, one where the discipline and strategy that made him undefeated in the octagon were redirected toward building a diversified empire. While many athletes struggle to replace the adrenaline and paydays of competition, Khabib seemed prepared for this transition long before he hung up his gloves. At the center of his business portfolio is Eagle FC, his own MMA promotion. Acquiring and rebranding the organization allowed Khabib to move from fighter to promoter, keeping him deeply involved in the sport while creating new revenue streams. Eagle FC has hosted events in Russia, the UAE, and even the United States, with plans to grow its roster and global reach. It's not just about selling tickets, it's about broadcasting rights, sponsorships, and building a long-term brand that could rival the very organization he once fought for. Khabib has also invested heavily in fitness and training facilities. His gyms in Russia and abroad serve dual purposes, providing world-class training to the next generation of fighters and functioning as profitable businesses tied to his name. These gyms also double as community hubs, especially in Dagestan, where aspiring athletes see them as both training grounds and symbols of opportunity. Sponsorship deals remain a cornerstone of his income. From premium sports apparel companies to nutrition brands, Khabib's endorsement value is bolstered bolstered by his undefeated record and global fan base. Unlike fighters who accept nearly any deal, Khabib is selective, aligning only with brands that match his values, a strategy that may limit volume but enhances the quality and longevity of his partnerships. Outside the fight world, he has ventured into hospitality. There are credible reports of his involvement in restaurants and cafes, particularly in the Middle East, catering to both locals and tourists who are drawn to his celebrity. In a region where dining is both social and cultural, attaching Khabib's name to a venue instantly elevates its profile. Then there are the investments that fly under the radar. Stakes in various companies, possibly in real estate developments, logistics, and other sectors where the details remain private. Friends and associates suggest that he's not chasing fast returns, but building a portfolio meant to provide stability for decades. It's a far cry from the stereotype of the retired fighter chasing risky ventures to fill the void. Perhaps the most interesting part of Khabib's investment strategy is that it's designed to be location-independent. Whether in Dagestan, Dubai, or Los Angeles, his businesses and partnerships operate without him needing to be physically present every day. This not only gives him freedom, but also ensures his income isn't tied to one market or industry. Yet among all these logical, calculated moves, there's one that stands apart, a venture so different from fighting, gyms, and even hospitality that it took fans and insiders by surprise. It's an investment that reveals not just Khabib the businessman, but Khabib the strategist who understands the value of unpredictability. And that unexpected move takes us into the realm of the global entrepreneur. Khabib Nurmagomedov's influence stretches far beyond Dagestan's borders and the Octagon's cage. Over the years, he has carefully positioned himself not just as a national hero, but as a global brand. This isn't accidental. It's the result of calculated moves into markets where his reputation, discipline, and clean image translate into tangible opportunities. One of the strongest pillars of this global reach is his networking in the Middle East. The UAE, in particular, has embraced Khabib as one of their own. His friendships with high-ranking officials and business leaders have given him access to investment opportunities few outsiders could even dream of. These connections have helped secure partnerships for Eagle FC events, sponsorship agreements, and openings into industries that are traditionally closed to outsiders. Khabib has also made a name for himself in sports ambassadorship, lending his image and credibility to organizations looking to grow their presence in new markets. His association with football clubs, sports federations, and even government-backed initiatives has turned him into a bridge between cultures. A figure equally comfortable speaking at a youth sports event in Dagestan, as he is attending a private dinner in Abu Dhabi with industry moguls. Then there's his restaurant and hospitality ventures, which have quietly expanded beyond Russia and into other territories. While these establishments bear his name or influence, they're more than just celebrity-owned spots. They're part of a long-term strategy to associate Khabib with premium experiences rooted in tradition. The blend of cultural authenticity and modern presentation appeals both to locals and to global fans who travel for the experience. Khabib's role as a global entrepreneur is defined not by volume, but by focus. He doesn't scatter his brand across dozens of random ventures. Instead, he chooses a few that align with his image and executes them with the same precision that made him a world champion. Yet, within this carefully curated empire lies something few could have predicted. A single asset that breaks from the pattern, raising eyebrows and sparking curiosity even among those who thought they knew Khabib's approach to money. That asset is the twist in the Eagles' story. The twist asset in Khabib Nurmagomedov's portfolio isn't a hypercar or an exotic villa. It's not even tied directly to sport. In fact, its value lies not in its ability to impress instantly, but in what it represents over time: patience, heritage, and vision. While details remain scarce, sources close to Khabib hint that he has invested in a significant land holding outside the typical property hotspots. This isn't just residential or commercial space, it's a tract of land with cultural and historical relevance, possibly tied to agricultural development or environmental preservation. For someone whose public life has been defined by action, this is an unusual unusually quiet move. Others speculate that the twist asset could be a stake in a tech or digital infrastructure company, something with no direct link to his public persona but enormous potential for long-term returns. If true, it suggests Khabib is thinking decades ahead, investing in industries that will outlast trends and possibly even sport itself. What makes this so intriguing is how different it is from his other holdings. While Eagle FC, gyms, and restaurants fit neatly into his brand, this asset exists in the shadows. No promotional photos, no press releases, just a strategic play hidden from the spotlight. This secrecy fuels speculation, but it also reflects Khabib's understanding of power. The most valuable assets are often the ones no one else sees coming. Whether it's land tied to his roots or a futuristic tech venture, this twist asset reinforces one truth. Khabib's empire isn't about following the obvious path. It's about mixing tradition with innovation, public legacy with private foresight. And as his story moves toward its conclusion, one thing becomes clear. For Khabib, wealth is less about spending and more about securing a foundation that will endure for generations. Khabib Nurmagomedov's legacy will always begin with his undefeated record, but it doesn't end there. His wealth, built on a foundation of discipline, strategic thinking, and loyalty to his principles, is part of what makes his story exceptional. While many athletes peak financially during their active careers, Khabib appears to be building something that grows stronger with time. From the rugged training grounds of Dagestan to the high-rise skylines of Dubai, every asset in his portfolio tells a piece of his journey. The Dagestan estate anchors him to his heritage. The Dubai properties place him among the elite of the global business world. His garage blends practicality with prestige. His watches and gifts reflect cultural respect and personal milestones. His businesses, from Eagle FC to restaurants, keep him relevant and profitable. And his twist asset shows that he's willing to invest where others might hesitate, even if no one's watching. But beyond the material, Khabib's legacy of wealth is also about restraint. He's proof that you can be one of the most recognizable athletes in the world without falling into the traps of reckless spending or hollow status symbols. His empire is built not just for himself, but for his family, his community, and the fighters he continues to mentor. In the end, Khabib's wealth mirrors his fighting style: calculated, efficient, and impossible to beat. It's not about how loud it is, but how lasting it will be. And just like in the Octagon, when Khabib makes a move with his money, it's because he's already thought several steps ahead. Because for the Eagle, the fight was never just in the cage. It was in building a life that no one could take away. One man retired undefeated, a global icon of discipline, humility, and dominance. The other burst onto the scene like a storm, destroying opponents in minutes and demanding the world's attention. Khabib Nurmagomedov, the Eagle of Dagestan, and Khamzat Chimaev, the Wolf of Chechnya, should have been natural allies. Brothers in faith, warriors from neighboring homelands, two Muslim champions reshaping the fight game. Instead, whispers of rivalry turned into headlines, and respect gave way to tension. Social media posts, subtle digs, and fiery call-outs transformed a dream matchup into one of MMA's most heated what-ifs. Fans began asking, is this about legacy, loyalty, or something deeper? Dagestan versus Chechnya, humility versus chaos? This isn't just a clash of fighters. It's a clash of identities, of philosophies, of pride. And to understand how Khabib and Khamzat went from shared respect to whispered conflict, we need to go back to where it all began. When Khabib Nurmagomedov stepped away from the Octagon in October 2020, he didn't just retire undefeated, he retired as one of the most respected figures in the history of the sport. At 29-0, he was the definition of dominance, a fighter who had never truly been beaten, who had mauled legends and contenders alike with his signature grappling style. But Khabib's power went far beyond the cage. In Dagestan, Khabib wasn't just a fighter, he was a symbol. A devout Muslim, he lived his career guided by discipline, faith, and humility. He spoke softly, dressed modestly, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that contrasted sharply with many of his peers. He refused alcohol sponsors, spoke against trash talk that crossed moral lines, and constantly reminded young fans that faith and family came before fame. For a region marked by hardship and political tension, he embodied a rare figure of pride. Every time Khabib fought, Dagestan would pause. Villages, towns, and cities gathered around TVs, watching their champion carry their name to the world. His father, Abdulmanap, was a revered coach who had built fighters from the ground up, instilling values of loyalty and respect. When Abdulmanap passed away in 2020, Khabib promised his mother he would never fight again. That promise was enough for him to retire at the top, walking away with his legacy intact. In many ways, Khabib was more than a fighter. He was an example of how combat sports could align with principles. He didn't just win fights, he preached discipline, integrity, and humility. And to millions, he wasn't just the Eagle of Dagestan, but a role model whose values seemed untouchable. But legends don't exist in a vacuum. As Khabib's story reached its perfect ending, another figure was rising fast, one whose style and swagger couldn't have been more different. And soon, the comparisons would spark a storm. If Khabib was the eagle who soared with discipline and patience, Khamzat Chimaev was the wolf who tore through his prey with ferocity. Born in Chechnya, raised in Sweden, Khamzat carried the fire of a fighter with something to prove, not just to the UFC, but to the world. His UFC debut in 2020 was like nothing the promotion had seen before. Within 10 days, he fought and won 2 times, dominating his opponents so badly that commentators struggled to find words. He ragdolled professional fighters like they were amateurs, then knocked out others in seconds. The UFC's hype machine kicked in immediately. Fans asked if this was the birth of the next Khabib. But Khamzat didn't want to be the next anything. He wasn't interested in following a blueprint. While Khabib had built his career on humility and soft-spoken answers, Khamzat was brash, wild, and unapologetically loud. He screamed, "Smash everybody!" into microphones, called out champions left and right, and promised to dominate entire divisions. He didn't care about being politically correct. He cared about chaos. The contrasts were clear. Where Khabib built his image on calm respect, Khamzat thrived on unpredictability. Where Khabib rarely insulted opponents, Khamzat taunted them openly. And yet, both men shared a connection through faith, through roots in the Caucasus, through the weight of being Muslim fighters on the global stage. For a time, it seemed like they were destined to support each other. In interviews, Khamzat even praised Khabib, calling him a champion and a legend. But beneath the surface, there was tension. Fans, media, and even UFC executives began framing Khamzat as the heir to Khabib's throne. And for Khamzat, comparisons felt like a chain holding him down. He didn't want to be the next Khabib. He wanted to be bigger. It was only a matter of time before those comparisons turned into conflict. To understand why the Khabib versus Khamzat conflict escalated so quickly, you have to look at the history of Dagestan and Chechnya. Both regions sit in the North Caucasus. Both are predominantly Muslim, and both have endured decades of hardship, war, and political upheaval. Their people are tough, proud, and fiercely loyal to their communities. But pride can breed rivalry. For years, Dagestan and Chechnya shared a complicated relationship. While they are neighbors, their cultural identities are distinct, and their histories have sometimes put them at odds. Sports often became a stage for those rivalries, with fighters from each region representing more than themselves. They represented their people. When Khabib rose to the top, Dagestan celebrated like never before. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a hero. Chechens respected him too, but there was an undercurrent of competition. Then came Khamzat, a Chechen-born wrecking ball, and suddenly the spotlight wasn't Dagestan's alone. Fans on social media poured fuel on the fire. Every time Khamzat smashed another opponent, comparisons to Khabib lit up Twitter, Instagram, and MMA forums. Who's better, Khabib or Khamzat? Would Khamzat dominate Dagestani fighters? The narrative wasn't just about 2 men. It became Dagestan versus Chechnya, humility versus aggression, tradition versus chaos. The tension wasn't just imagined. Fighters from both camps began making subtle remarks. Khabib's circle emphasized loyalty, respect, and earning your place. Khamzat's team fired back with boasts, suggesting Dagestani fighters didn't want to test themselves against him. Soon, it wasn't just an internet debate. It was a cultural one. The idea of Khabib and Khamzat clashing wasn't just exciting to fans. It was symbolic, the embodiment of 2 proud regions colliding. And while both fighters initially avoided direct shots at each other, the undercurrent was clear. Something was building. And then, with a single post on social media, the quiet rivalry burst burst into the open. At first, the tension between Khabib and Khamzat existed mostly in the whispers of fans and headlines of journalists eager to stoke a rivalry. Both men rarely addressed each other directly, but the silence left room for speculation. That silence, however, wouldn't last forever. The first sparks came in the form of subtle comments during interviews. Khamzat, riding the momentum of his incredible UFC debut run, was asked repeatedly about Khabib. The questions were always framed the same way. Are you the next Khabib? Could you beat Khabib? Do you see yourself as the successor to Dagestan's Eagle? At first, Khamzat deflected with praise. He called Khabib a legend, acknowledged his achievements, and made it clear that he respected him. But as the questions kept coming, his answers began to shift. Instead of only praise, there was a tone of frustration, an insistence that he was his own man, not a copy. Meanwhile, Khabib's camp wasn't blind to the hype. Ali Abdelaziz, Khabib's outspoken manager, was quick to temper expectations. He dismissed comparisons, saying Khamzat was talented but had a long way to go before being mentioned in the same breath as Khabib. In Dagestan, whispers circulated that Khamzat was being reckless, skipping the lines of respect and hierarchy that defined their culture. The real ignition point, though, came with a single social media post. On Instagram, Khamzat shared a photo with a caption implying that certain fighters, Dagestani fighters, were avoiding him. He never used Khabib's name directly, but fans didn't need him to. The meaning was clear. Screenshots spread like wildfire, with fans interpreting it as a veiled shot at the Eagle himself. Almost immediately, responses started pouring in. Supporters of Khabib accused Khamzat of disrespect, of biting the hand that paved the way for Muslim fighters in the UFC. Khamzat's fans countered that he had every right to claim his spot, that he wasn't riding Khabib's coattails, but forging his own path. And while Khabib himself stayed silent, the noise around them grew louder. Fighters began being asked about it during interviews, analysts debated it on podcasts, YouTubers built entire videos dissecting the Dagestan versus Chechnya beef. What had started as comparisons became conflict, and with every passing week, the sparks threatened to ignite into something much bigger. In the modern fight game, battles aren't only fought inside the cage, they're waged on Instagram, Twitter, and every platform where fans gather. And for Khabib and Khamzat, social media became the arena where the rivalry truly exploded. Khamzat, never one to shy away from attention, began posting more aggressively. He dropped cryptic captions about fighters ducking him, about wolves hunting while others talked. Fans quickly filled in the blanks. The others he referred to were Khabib's team, perhaps even Khabib himself. It didn't take long for Ali Abdelaziz, Khabib's manager, to fire back. Known for his combative presence online, Ali lashed out at Khamzat in tweets and interviews. He accused him of disrespect, claimed he wasn't in Khabib's league, and suggested he should focus on proving himself before daring to mention Khabib's name. These comments poured gasoline on the fire. The MMA community ate it up. Clips of Ali's interviews went viral, side by side with Khamzat's fiery Instagram posts. Fans from Dagestan and Chechnya clashed in comment sections, trading insults and defending their heroes. It was no longer just a fighter rivalry. It was a cultural tug-of-war being played out on the biggest stage in combat sports. Khamzat thrived in the chaos. He doubled down, reposting fan edits that showed him smashing opponents with captions like, "I eat them all." While he never outright disrespected Khabib by name, his tone was clear. He was ready to claim the throne, and he wasn't waiting for permission. Khabib, true to form, didn't respond directly. His silence, however, spoke volumes. To some, it was the silence of a man above the noise, someone who had nothing to prove. To others, it looked like disapproval, that Khabib saw Khamzat as brash, undisciplined, and unworthy of the respect he demanded. The clash of styles, Khabib's quiet dignity versus Khamzat's loud bravado, was playing out in real time, and the world was watching, refreshing feeds daily, waiting for the next post, the next quote, the next escalation. But beneath the social media spectacle, the conflict cut deeper than callouts. At its core, this wasn't just about fighting, it was about faith, loyalty, and the very values each man represented. To understand why the tension between Khabib and Khamzat resonated so deeply, you have to understand what they each stood for. For Khabib, fighting was never just about wins and losses. It was about legacy, family, and above all, respect. Raised under the guidance of his father Abdulmanap, Khabib's career was built on principles: loyalty to his team, humility in victory, and discipline outside the cage. He often spoke about the importance of living as a role model for young Muslims worldwide. His faith wasn't a marketing tool, it was the backbone of his entire life. Khamzat, on the other hand, embodied a different philosophy. He, too, was a devout Muslim, proud of his roots and open about his beliefs. But his approach to the fight game was raw, aggressive, and unapologetically loud. He relished chaos, thrived on confrontation, and didn't care if his words ruffled feathers. Where Khabib valued structure and order, Khamzat seemed to embrace unpredictability. This contrast created a philosophical clash. To Khabib's supporters, Khamzat represented arrogance, a lack of discipline that dishonored the sport. To Khamzat's fans, he was authentic, a man who spoke his mind, fought anyone, and lived without filters. The conflict deepened when religious leaders and influential figures in the Muslim community began weighing in. Some praised Khabib as the gold standard for Muslim athletes, a beacon of discipline and humility. Others defended Khamzat, arguing that his passion and fearlessness were just as valid an expression of their shared faith. For both men, the scrutiny was intense. Every word was dissected, every action interpreted as a statement. Khabib's silence was read as condemnation. Khamzat's fire was seen as defiance. And fans across the globe weren't just choosing between fighters, they were choosing between philosophies, between two very different visions of what it meant to carry their heritage into the fight game. It was no longer just about who could win in the cage, it was about who truly represented the spirit of their people. And with so much pride at stake, the conflict was reaching a dangerous tipping point. The tension that had simmered between Khabib and Khamzat finally reached a boiling point when Khamzat began making sharper, more pointed comments about Dagestani fighters. In one interview, he hinted that certain camps avoided him, that some men talk respect but don't show it when it's time to fight. He never said Khabib's name, but to anyone listening, the message was obvious. This was more than just competitive fire. For Dagestanis, loyalty to teammates and elders is sacred. To even imply that Khabib's camp was ducking him was a bold accusation, one that touched nerves not only in Dagestan, but across the MMA world. Khabib, as always, chose not to respond directly. But his silence wasn't emptiness. It was heavy, deliberate. In Dagestan, silence can speak louder than words. To many, Khabib's refusal to acknowledge Khamzat was a sign of disapproval, almost a dismissal. It was as if he was saying, "You are not on my level. You don't deserve my attention." But others saw the silence differently. They saw a rift, a refusal to unite, and they began speculating about deeper divisions. Dagestan versus Chechnya, an old rivalry reignited on the biggest MMA stage. Fans debated endlessly online, each side posting memes, screenshots, and clips to prove their point. The UFC press only fanned the flames. Reporters began asking fighters from both camps about the potential matchup. Could Khamzat beat Khabib? Would the undefeated legend come out of retirement to test the rising wolf? Every question added more fuel to the fire, even as Khabib brushed them aside. The breaking point came during one heated back and forth on social media. Khamzat fired off a message that referenced loyalty, saying, "I fight anyone." Some people only talk about loyalty when it benefits them. The message spread instantly, interpreted as a direct shot at Khabib's famous mantra of loyalty and respect. That was it. The line had been crossed. Even those who tried to downplay the tension could no longer ignore it. What had begun as whispers and speculation was now undeniable. Khabib and Khamzat were on opposite sides, their philosophies clashing in a way that seemed destined to end only one way, inside the cage. But there was one major problem. Khabib was retired, and the UFC was caught in the middle of a cultural storm. From the UFC's perspective, Khabib versus Khamzat was a dream scenario. Two dominant forces, representing massive fan bases, with a storyline steeped in culture, pride, and rivalry. On paper, it could have been one of the biggest fights in UFC history, but reality was far more complicated. Dana White had spent years trying to convince Khabib to return after retirement. Every offer, every attempt had been met with the same answer: no. Khabib had made a promise to his mother after his father's passing, and to him, that promise was sacred. No paycheck, no belt, no opponent could change that. At the same time, Khamzat was climbing the ranks at breakneck speed. He was smashing opponents at welterweight and middleweight, calling out champions, and terrifying anyone who dared to share the octagon with him. The UFC wanted to push him as their next global superstar, but the shadow of Khabib loomed large. Fans, analysts, and even other fighters kept asking the same thing. Could he beat Khabib? Dana White faced a dilemma. Promoting Khamzat meant constantly battling comparisons to Khabib, but pushing the Khabib angle also meant stirring a rivalry that risked alienating Dagestan and Chechnya, two of the UFC's most passionate and influential fan bases. Behind the scenes, UFC matchmakers floated the idea of a Khamzat versus Islam Makhachev fight, which would indirectly pit him against Khabib's protege. But Khabib's camp shut it down, unwilling to let teammates become pawns in a spectacle. Meanwhile, Khamzat's team kept pressing for big names, dismissing any suggestion that he avoid Dagestani fighters. The UFC leaned into the tension publicly while navigating carefully behind closed doors. Promotional videos highlighted Khamzat as the next great Muslim champion, but never directly compared him to Khabib. Dana teased the idea of dream fights, but stopped short of calling for it outright. Still, the questions wouldn't go away. Fans demanded answers. Could the Eagle return for one last fight to defend his legacy against the Wolf? Would Khamzat finally force him out of retirement? Or would the UFC forever be left with a rivalry too big to book? As time passed, it became clear that the fight would never happen. Khabib remained retired, focused on coaching, building his own promotion, and mentoring the next generation of fighters like Islam Makhachev. Khamzat, meanwhile, continued his tear through the UFC ranks, cementing himself as one of the scariest prospects in modern MMA. But the conflict between them left a permanent mark. To this day, fans debate who would have won. Forums and podcasts revisit the rivalry whenever either man makes headlines. In Dagestan, Khabib is still revered as untouchable. His 29-0 record a symbol of perfection. In Chechnya, Khamzat is celebrated as a warrior unafraid to challenge even the greatest. Their clash wasn't just about two men, it was about identity, pride, and the philosophies they represented. Khabib embodied discipline, humility, and loyalty to tradition. Khamzat embodied fire, ambition, and the refusal to wait his turn. Both paths were valid, both were powerful, but they stood in stark contrast. The legacy of the conflict is a story of what if. What if Khabib hadn't retired? What if the UFC had managed to book the fight? What if the Eagle and the Wolf had shared the cage, not just the headlines? These questions linger in MMA circles, whispered in gyms, debated in comment sections, and immortalized in highlight reels that splice their careers side by side. For now, the rivalry lives on in speculation. And maybe that's fitting, because sometimes the greatest stories in combat sports aren't the ones that end with a clear winner. They're the ones that leave us wondering forever. Khabib versus Khamzat may never have been written in the Octagon, but in the hearts of fans, it remains one of the greatest unsolved rivalries in MMA history.